Hello. You ruined it.
It always gets me that my finger is like so far ahead of the others. Anyway.
So we're opening up slightly different today because Tera can't use her fingers right. They're not bending the right direction. Hello. Welcome back to the Story Darlings podcast. I'm Sandra.
And I'm Tera, the one that can't use her fingers properly.
What are we talking about today?
We are talking about It Ends With Us.
So excited to talk
movie
about
and
this.
Book.
Yes, we are going to compare. We're going to walk you through kind of the highlights of the book, right, and the movie, and just share some of the differences. But I think we're just going to talk super casually about this one. And I don't know about you, but I've been super excited to talk about this one. I've been anticipating the movie for a long time, ever since it was announced Blake Lively was starring in the adaptation. And can we just talk about her outfits and her hair in the movie? Because, whoa, gorgeous.
When I grow up, I want to be Blake Lively. She is gorgeous in everything. One of my favorite movies is Age of Adeline, just because she is so fucking gorgeous. I can't get over it.
I mean, she was in Gossip Girl, right? Gossip Girl and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I mean, she's just disgustingly beautiful. She's always been like the living embodiment of sunshine, just blooming.
Her and like Margot Robbie.
Yes.
I don't understand what kind of good they did in a previous life to deserve to be reincarnated as those two people, but...
Someone out there is going to argue, well, they're rich. Like, no, this isn't about their money, because I have a feeling that they would be just as stunning if they were not in this career. Anyway.
They would be normal stunning, but... I mean, Blake even says with her outfits, because I know you just mentioned that, there's been an interview with her talking about she styles herself and how everybody gives her all of this credit. And she's like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I have access to all of these styles and designers and things like that nobody else has access to. It's actually really easy when you have that. What's crazy is the person who doesn't have a stylist, doesn't have the money, doesn't have access to all of those designers, that still goes out and looks marvelous.
It's just more brownie points for her because she's so humble, and she also knows her privilege and openly shares that privilege.
I will go back on that privilege just a little bit, because there are interviews with her saying that this movie was a low budget movie and they'd put a Taylor Swift song in the trailer, but they didn't have the money basically to put it in the movie. I'm like, bitch, please, Taylor Swift's your best friend. She'd give you the song. Like, check your privilege here. There ain't no way Taylor wouldn't let you use her song.
And then even that, like her husband being so involved with everything too, with the release of Deadpool as well. Yeah,
they're so cute together.
They are cute together. It's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
And they just play off each other so well. They just complement each other. They have the same brand of humor. They're both just very quick about the humor too. He dishes something, she dishes it right back. And you just love to watch the banter between them. It's so funny. Mm-hmm. So I read It Ends With Us probably 3 years ago as well. And I think it might have been my first Colleen Hoover book. And I was hooked. I'm just hooked on the way Colleen Hoover writes things. They're accessible. She's so good at emotional impact. She's really good at showing real relationships, because a majority of the relationships out there are fucked up. They are toxic. They are highly emotional. They're just people not having the emotional tools and being equipped with, the communication skills and stuff to be able to navigate whatever life throws at them. And I just really enjoy that about Colleen Hoover's books.
Especially YA books, because as a teenager, young adult, you definitely do not have those.
No.
Emotional
you don't.
tactics and intelligence.
There's been a lot of drama around the release of the movie, and not just the movie. Before the adaptation, there was drama around Colleen Hoover as an author.
There is also a drama between the two takes of the movie, because the book does delve into some very personal situations that should not be made light of, right? There's domestic violence, and I think Colleen does a really, really great job at showing a little bit of a behind the scenes look at that. And you have people who are like, but that's not what happened to me. This is taking it lightly. And you have people who are against Blake Lively because she is promoting the movie as kind of a rom-com-y, like silly movie. And it is to a certain degree, but it does have some more deep scenes in it and a deeper meaning behind some of the stuff. Even the title has a deeper meaning, right? They're finding fault in Blake for not using it as a platform to discuss domestic violence, whereas Justin Baldoni, who plays Ryle in the movie and was the director of the movie, is talking more about the domestic violence side of it. And so you have people on two warring sides of it should have been more about that or it should have been less about that. I kind of disagree. Yes, I think that it should, like, it is a great movie to show the domestic violence, but I think the point to both the book and the movie were to not dwell on the domestic violence side of it, but dwell on the emotional impact it has on the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's not always a cut and dry situation. And Colleen even puts this in the note from the author section that there's a lot of victim blame that goes along with women who stay in that kind of crappy situation. And that could be said all across the board with women who stay in emotionally abusive situations, financially abusive situations, physically abusive situations, women who stay just in, this is a toxic situation, women who stay in all kinds of situations where everybody around them can see every single red flag, and this guy is, or even girl, if you reverse it, this person is a walking red flag, but for whatever reason the person stays with them. And what everybody else is missing is all of those little good times, all of the falling in love, all of the, well, he's not that bad, well, she's not that bad, well, this is the backstory to what happened, all of those things that can go into, I'm going to talk for a woman because I've been in this situation, can go into your mind of, well, do I want to end it strictly because of this? This one thing, is it enough to end the however many years? This one instance where he made a mistake, is it enough to end? This one situation, and I'm going to go a little bit of a spoiler. There's a time where she is put in a situation of, do I call the cops or not? And her reasoning in the book, and you didn't see it as much in the movie, but her reasoning behind not calling the cops is, I don't want it to harm his career.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had that particular thought in my head of, I don't want it to harm him in some way. Like, I don't want to turn him in because I don't want it to harm him in some way. And so I think people who are against this either have not been in that situation or have been. Maybe it's you've been in that situation and you made a different choice. You got out. You didn't have those thoughts. And that's great. Or it's the person who's never had anything like that happen to them. And so they can't understand why there would be any back and forth. It's well, if it's so bad, why didn't she just get out? That I think was the point to this book, is that it's not nuanced. There are a significant amount of nuances that goes into each and every person's story that you can't look at it and just be like, well, it should have been done this way, because that's the point. It's a nuanced situation. Like, every person's story with it is different. Everybody has a different line that they would never cross. And sometimes those lines, as it says in the book, get pushed. And now their line is over here. And I'd never let him cross this line. And then it gets pushed because 8 nice things have happened in between the 2 bad things. And they're like, well, now it's this line. And it's moving goalpost sometimes. And so I think that there's a lot of people not understanding in some of this, and a lot of good intentioned people trying to draw awareness, but also not fully understanding that in drawing awareness to one situation and expecting every situation to be the same is actually harmful to those situations that are not the same.
I appreciated Colleen Hoover's acknowledgments page where she shared that her mother was in a domestic violence situation and was able to leave when she was like 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I also really appreciate the way that the book was written, with the series of flashbacks that were sprinkled throughout that kind of set the stage for what Lily Bloom grew up with. Those experiences served as her threshold, right? Like her kind of norm for what she survived and experienced. So you talk about the moving goalpost and where you draw the line. And for Lily, that was kind of established at an early age. And the crazy thing about the story is the first instance of domestic violence with Ryle, it's a very gray area. She's not even sure something nefarious happened because it happened so quickly. So we see in the first couple instances, she is in such shock and coming to that she doesn't really trust what happened because it all is like a blur that just happened, right? And she's one of those people where she was independent, just how she handled her father's funeral and how she's pursuing her dreams. Like she leaves this marketing job to pursue her dream of opening up a flower shop, which is what she'd been talking about since she was a kid. She's a very strong person. She's very able to hold her own and stand toe to toe with someone. But you just see how all of the extra context from childhood affected where she sees this line and she just sees the good in people all the time, right? A part of her feels guilty because Ryle did not want a relationship at all in the first place. He said, I don't want a relationship. And she was essentially like, well, if you don't want a relationship, I'm a relationship kind of girl. So sorry, we'll just have to be friends. So in a way, Ryle was kind of enticed to think about like, okay, maybe I do want to try and pursue a relationship and give this a shot because she's worth it to me. You have to believe that Lily felt kind of responsible too, like it was on her to make it work because he never wanted it in the first place. So she must be blaming herself too to a certain point. There's just so many layers of complexity around this.
And two completely different takes, because I didn't make Justin. Justin came to see the movie with me. I obviously knew what was going to happen, and I had warned him, like, something's going to happen. I didn't give spoilers, but I'm like, something's going to happen. And Justin is a girl about sad parts in movies, and he, like, throws a mini hissy fit when sad parts happen in movies and TV shows. Like, the amount of times I've heard about Ross and Rachel, and that he won't even watch those scenes where bad things happen between them is astronomical. So I warned him that something was going to happen. After one of the flashbacks, he's like, oh, I'm not going to like the dad, am I? I'm not telling you anything. And so his take after the first instance in the movie was that he was afraid she would automatically assume that he was abusing her based off of her past life, like her past with her dad, right? So she wouldn't even give him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't mean to do that. She was just gonna, cut it because that was her goalpost, right? That was where she said she would never be in that. And with her past, their parents, Justin expected her just to end it and not even give him a shadow of a doubt that that's not what actually happened, because in the movie, it is left to interpretation as to what actually happened in that scene. Whereas in the book, it's not left as much to interpretation. But I still read it strictly as domestic violence. And I think that that is where you had a slightly different take where you're like, it could have been, it could have not been. And Justin had a take of it wasn't, it was an accident, but she's going to read into it that it was. And I'm like, bitch, get out of there. Like, I know what just happened. And so you have, even just between the three of us, very nuanced takes on what happened in that one particular scene based off of life experiences that may be just a little bit different.
So you mentioned seeing it with Justin. I saw it with my sister Taylor. Taylor has not read the book, and Taylor is not into the sad. Okay. So she really loved Big Sis for taking her to this movie. And we're sitting there throughout the entire movie. And at these pivotal moments that are just so dark and you don't really understand what's going on, like what you're seeing, I would catch her just like turn to look at me. Like she said to me at one point, I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. Like she didn't know whether Lily would stay, whether they would break up, if it was going to escalate and get much, much, much worse. She honestly didn't know. And she, like, Ryle is so likable too, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because not everyone is a black and white, you know, villain or good person. That's the thing that's so interesting about it, is he is a good guy. He's a good dad. He's a great brother. He is a great neurosurgeon. But there's this part of him that we see he had an experience as well in his childhood that really fucked with him and fed into these very explosive tendencies that come out with him. You want to talk about the childhood experience?
When we first meet Ryle, let's go back to the beginning of this
The
book.
first flag?
We see, after Lily has made this roast at her father's funeral of, she's supposed to say 5 things she liked about him and she couldn't even come up with one, and so she just stands up at the eulogy and just stares at people and then walks off.
That was such an
And
emotional scene, though, for
mhm.
real. Like, I was tearing up.
So she goes to this building because she just wants to have some peace and alone time, right? And we see Ryle come up to the rooftop too, and he is beating, like, he is mad. He is like taking his anger out on this chair, this furniture. And he finally notices her sitting there like, what's going on? And I think, I can't remember if it's in the movie or the book, but Lily's character is trying to lighten the mood a little bit. And she says something about like what has him angry. And then she says, it's the chair, wasn't it? The chair did something to you. And
Yeah, she's
it's
like,
like,
it was a woman, wasn't it? Or a man? No, it was the chair.
yeah. And I thought that was just a very quick peek into who Lily was going to be. Like, very quippy, very
De-escalating,
funny, very
de-escalating situations.
cute in that. And then we find out that Ryle is a neurosurgeon, and I love the banter back and forth of her not believing him that he's a neurosurgeon. And then he mentions in one of their naked truths that he watched a kid die today because the kid's brother had found a gun and didn't realize it was a real gun and had shot the kid. Lily went straight to, what is that going to do to that other little kid? And Ryle answers, it's going to destroy him for life. And that is our first peek into Ryle's like psyche, because you know he is talking from experience. Like, he leaves nothing except for Lily, I guess, who didn't understand that what happened there. But every reader, at least I, like, knew straight off, and even Justin knew straight off that that's what happened to him as a kid. He had personal knowledge of, it's going to destroy him for life. And so that does come out in both the book and the movie, that he had an older brother that he accidentally shot and killed. And in the books, that scene got to me, where he's describing that happening. In the movie, it just kind of glossed over, which again is common take on books that turn into movies, but there were a lot of things that the movie just glossed a little bit over. Some of them okay, and some of them I think it took away from that compassion for Ryle a little bit, that they glossed over that a little bit. But in the book, it describes him trying to put his brother's brains back in his head because he thought that he could help him. I read more into that probably than everybody else, because he's a neurosurgeon for a reason. And that is the memory he has, is trying to put his brother's brains back in his head and fix it. And I'm like, no wonder he became a neurosurgeon, because he can fix other people's brains. And I mean, not that they needed to show like all of it, but like, I think that there was something that was missed in that interaction, and just
I
saying, oh, well, he
still,
shot his brother.
I think what they were going for with the movie anyway is just focusing in on the woman experience, right? Rather
Mm-hmm.
than really building up that empathy for the guy. But I think that the way that they shared that story with his sister, Alyssa,
Mm-hmm.
that was so touching. And I was sitting in the theater with just tears streaming down my face, because the way she talked about what happened with Emerson and Ryle's, just how he's been ever since. And she thinks that, like, she didn't say he ended that day too, but it messed
Mm-hmm.
him up for life after that moment. It changed him for the worse. And you see like her struggle with trying to love him as a sister and wanting the best for him, but also it was just, I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
was okay with it, but Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I think this is the like two sides, right? I appreciate that they wanted to see it from the woman's side, but that is what's leading to people being like, well, why didn't she just leave? Like, there's empathy for this guy coming from the woman because of this situation. And I think ignoring, well, not ignoring, because that's not what the movie did, but like downplaying that, I think downplays her having a choice, because that did impact her choice.
It did.
That did create some even gray areas in her choice, that he also has dealt with some shit, right? And that is where I wanted to see some more of at least the big things. And that was a huge thing to him, just as much as her going through her family struggles. That was a huge thing to him, and then played a huge part in their relationship together and in her decision to stay or not stay. And so I think that that was a little bit of a missed opportunity to say, like, this is where some of these gray areas come from. It's not just he's a bad person. He's had like this peachy keen life.
He's not a bad person. He has a very reactive trauma response when certain things,
and he needs to get help for it. Like, I'm not
he never got that resolved.
Yes.
And it's just gotten worse. The fact that he has never entered into a relationship and keeps people away, that's not helping anything. Healthy. It's just compounding the problem and bringing it to what it is now. You see Ryle and how he's depicted in his past. And then you also see on the other end of the spectrum, Atlas Corrigan, who in this opening rooftop scene, in one of her naked truths, she tells Ryle that she lost her virginity to a homeless guy named Atlas. You get these flashbacks in the book and in the movie. I thought they were done, as good as can be given the movie adaptation, where Atlas went to this abandoned house because he was apparently kicked out of his own home, which the home environment wasn't great at all. You find out that he went to go commit suicide because he was very deeply, deeply unhappy with his life and didn't have any value for himself. Lily was this angel of a person that he just happened to look up and see. And then she saw him sneaking in and out and gave him food and was like this first kind person, this first person to show him any kind of kindness and humanity, giving him basic supplies. And that's how their relationship starts. And you see him growing up in a shitty circumstance, abusive environment, struggling. He's bullied at school because, kids are fucking stupid sometimes and it just can be so cruel. And so I did like how they compared having his male character and then Ryle's main character too, because they both have extremely traumatic pasts. But the way that they were able to grow up and out of that type of behavior was completely different. And I think it's because Atlas let someone in. He let Lily in, whereas Ryle didn't let anyone in.
Yeah, I mean, he had his sister and his family that I think he let in to a certain degree, but not all the way. Like, you do see a great relationship between him and his sister. And I think that that is relationship goals because they are so cute together. But I don't think even she understood the level that destroyed him as a kid. And the level that it impacted the rest of his life. Like I said, even the career that he chose to go into, I think was influenced by the fact that there was that trauma. But yeah, I do see a lot of kind of Atlas being put on a pedestal and Ryle being vilified. Don't get me wrong, I think that is good and bad. His actions were bad, objectively bad. And Atlas has objectively been good, right? We never saw any bad scenes.
There was one instance, but he apologized. It was the second restaurant scene whenever they started throwing punches, and that's a trigger for Lily.
Yes, it's a trigger for Lily, but I wouldn't say that was objectively bad. It is a trigger for her, but he was standing up for her. So, I mean, I guess it is illegal because he assaulted the dude.
I mean, it is his restaurant, but he did assault someone, and then he did it in front of Lily, and he did go to her shop to apologize.
So... yeah, I just, and that was also a scene where I had to warn Justin because I thought, I had read before I went into the movie that they were going to kind of downplay the domestic violence up till the end and leave her as an unreliable narrator. And they did, because there were a lot of times where she didn't know if it was or if it wasn't, and she just woke up.
She said that verbatim in the opening scene. Or maybe I'm an unreliable narrator.
Yeah. And so they were going to leave her as an unreliable narrator. So, knowing my husband, I thought that he was going to have a little meltdown when Atlas came into the picture because he was going to accuse her of cheating and, basically go Ryle.
Yeah.
And I was going to have some problems with him if he did that. Because Atlas had not and does not do anything that puts him in any kind of a negative frame in my mind. Because I think Lily needed to see somebody was there to stand up for her, even in a violent way, to feel like she could trust herself to stand up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm saying, like, even though he did something that was bad, I think Atlas is still the character that is on this pedestal.
You make a good point with him having that physical blow up at Ryle in the restaurant, because it further proved in front of Lily for her to see firsthand again that Ryle does have this rage and anger inside him too, right? So it did kind of cement that fact. So I'll give there.
And even not just a physical rage, but his comment to Atlas.
Oh my God.
And in the movie, he comments that she wasted her virginity on Atlas. In the book, I think his comment was even more violent, even if it's just emotionally violent, because what was it that he said? He said,
pity fucked a homeless boy.
Yeah, that she pity fucked him. Sometimes words hurt just as much as physical violence. And I think
But you know
right
what?
there,
Alice had the perfect response to that. She was like, what he said, I didn't mean it. And he just turned and looked at her and calmly said, I know, I was there. We connected soul to soul. Like, I was there, you were there. We know how it felt to each other in that moment. And he had all the green flags.
I think that was also a clear, point of no return for Lily too, because for me, as an outside person looking in, I saw how much he knew her. And in comparison, Ryle, who would say something like that to somebody that she cared about and that he knew she cared about, clearly doesn't know her, right? Clearly, either if he does know her, he doesn't care enough, or he clearly doesn't know her.
Another aspect that I appreciated about how the dynamic with Ryle was presented was even just meeting Jenny, the mom, Lily's mom, and you see Jenny's face light up at hearing he's a doctor and he's so handsome too. So it just further adds another layer of this complexity around Lily leaving, because now her mom's invested and she never planned on introducing them in the first place. And I guess you could look at this situation as being a little bit manipulative on Ryle's part too, though, because he kind of wormed his way into this meeting. She wasn't going to bring him to dinner. He was just like, can I meet your mom?
But also, devil's advocate here, from Lily's point of view, because I've had situations like this too. To her, that felt like he was making a step in the direction of a full-on relationship. Right? It didn't feel manipulative. In the moment. It felt like he was giving up another piece of himself that he has said he wouldn't do.
That's so interesting how our perspectives are different too. Because my initial reaction was to look at it as a manipulative maneuver to kind of further embed himself with her. And you were like, no, she challenged him to go all in and be in a relationship. And that's exactly what he was doing. So it's very interesting.
So again, I think the people who are wanting this to be, here's what domestic violence looks like, and here, you're not doing it right. I don't think it's that simple. And yes, each person's different a little bit, but there are so many different ways. Sandra is reading into that as manipulation, which is a form of domestic violence. And I'm looking at it as it could be a green flag if he's really trying to prove himself.
Yeah.
As invested in this relationship and really trying to make it work. Now, do I think that maybe it was a little too soon, or maybe they should have had a conversation around it first? Yes. That's my adult coming out, not my younger self who has been in that situation coming out. But looking back on those situations, yes, there should have been communication involved, not just, hey, I want to do this involved. especially since that scene happened so close after the first incidents of domestic violence. There are
Yes.
some like nuances there too of she's still wrapping her head around, did he just abuse me? Did he not? Is that what abuse looks like? Is that not? Am I being over dramatic? Am I not? Because that
Mhm.
is something that comes into your head a lot as somebody in that situation. Am I being over dramatic? Did that just happen the way I think it just happened? Or did that happen in a different way and I'm making it into more than it actually is? And especially those first instance of it, it feels very much like I'm reading into this. But as you go more and more, obviously it gets harder and harder to be, I'm reading into this.
One thing for Lily in trying to grapple with what just happened is the domestic violence that she bore witness to as a child was very overt displays, very
Mm-hmm.
violent, very physical. I mean, there's no mistaking what it is. It's just ugly and right there in your face all the time. And it was like Ryle's exhibition of this behavior was so different. It was just as abusive and bad, but it was a different form of it too. And she struggled with that.
I feel like she saw the other side of domestic violence as a kid too.
Mm.
She just didn't realize what was actually happening. I have a feeling that her dad was not only overtly violent, but he had those littler moments too, where.
Oh, with her, she was scared shitless, like in the
And with
kitchen
her
with the
mom,
cook.
like,
Yeah.
but I
Her
feel like
mom.
she probably didn't. They didn't make the same impact that the overtly like violent situations did on her psyche. But I have a
Well,
feeling that she witnessed some of those other incidents too.
she witnessed and she experienced firsthand herself. You get the sense that Lily grew up having to placate, right,
Mm-hmm.
and disengage him from blowing up. And then you see that happen as her relationship with Ryle progresses, is she's trying to calm him down. She's like in his face, touching his face, trying to like connect with him and calm him down and apologizing. She's trying to de-escalate the
Mm-hmm.
situation just as she was when she was a kid.
The look at me during that last
Oh my god, that was so hard to
domestic
watch.
violence situation, she was trying to get him to see her as a person
Mm-hmm.
and as the person that he loved to get him to stop. And yes, that is like a de escalation tactic of see me as a person outside of your rage.
Yeah.
See me, like look at me. I am the person you are doing this to. It's not just an entity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. I think she probably had a lot of that with her dad too, especially during the scene where he attacks Atlas. You see her try and like get him to draw his attention away from Atlas and to her. Like,
Mm.
I'm the person you love. Help me. You are hurting me by hurting him.
Another thing I liked about both the movie and the book, especially the book, is there's one point where she asked her mom why she stayed, and her mom just simply said it was easier to stay. And I think that can speak to all kinds of people because, as you said, everyone has a different threshold with what they can do. For some people, it's going to be much harder, financially impossible to leave a horrible situation. So they do stay. And they believe that trying to de-escalate the situation, walking on eggshells so that another instance doesn't happen, as soon, and things like that is easier to deal with than walking away. And so I appreciated that raw honesty. Like that was just another perspective that we got on this other woman who survived through this kind of shit. So,
Well, and I think there's another part to the easier two, especially with her dad, because he was the mayor of the town, right? And we saw him get away with the abuse towards Atlas because they just blamed it on he was a homeless guy taking advantage of my daughter. And because he was the mayor, his word was gold, right? And you see
mhm.
that a lot, that the woman is not going to be believed because the man has some sort of power, whether that be police officers whose wives are getting abused or other people in power. Obviously, they couldn't be doing that because they're such a stand-up guy. And so it's easier just to keep your mouth shut because you're not going to be believed. I mean, even yourself don't believe what is happening. You don't believe that it was that bad, or you try and make it not that bad in your head. It's just easier to not put yourself through that mental torture. after the fact. Like I said, words can sometimes hurt more than physical abuse. And at least with the physical abuse, you know what you're getting. But with the words, you don't always know what kind of damage those can do. And so it's just easier sometimes.
But
And that
that's
was
kind
a
of a somber
downer.
note.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, to pick this back up a little, I like how in his corner, Ryle did have his sister and Marshall, and he was very talented at his work. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
exceptional at it. And that kind of added fuel to the fire on why he was so enraged whenever he did burn his hand, and then his hand was cut up by the glass too after knocking Lily to the ground. But at least he did have his sister in his corner. Like that was a positive influence for sure because she was such a likable character. Like very optimistic, very enthusiastic, very hardworking, some comic relief in there, and very supportive of both Lily and her brother in different ways, like they needed.
I'm
And
going to
then,
get hate for this. I know
oh
this
God,
already.
oh no,
I know
what
I'm
are
going
you
to get
gonna
hate.
say?
So the scene, the very first physical scene, right?
The casserole.
Yes. So she giggles at him because he touches the hot pan. And that's his own
And
choice. Like,
she's wine drunk
she's
too.
drunk. He's drunk too. Like, they're both drunk. He makes a mistake, touches it with his hand. He has a surgery. It's going to be saving the lives of 2 little children. Like, I get all of that. She pushes him back. So she also engages in a form of domestic violence after she wakes up. Because that's how he hurt, like that's how he cuts his hand, is she pushes him. And so she is having a trauma response back to the abuse and being abusive. And I think that that is something that people don't understand all the time, is that there is a trauma response to abuse after, I guess not even after, but like where you just want it to be done.
Yeah,
Right.
and get away.
And so I think during that scene, you can see that she is also physically abusive. Like she pushes him and she's sorry about that after. I think it is a trauma response, but just taking it out of context, you can say she is equally as to blame in that situation. Now, he did it first, so I would question equally on that. But there was domestic violence back and forth in that situation.
No,
and it
I don't think
wasn't
you're
just
gonna
a
get
clear cut,
hate.
he did it, she didn't do anything, like, because
No,
she
you see
did.
her. You're
But
not
that's
gonna get
the only
hate for
time
that.
you see her fight back, because she felt bad about it. She felt like.
But even the way that scene happened, it was done, I thought, very well too. Because you see at dinner, she's just like, "Oh yeah, we had an accident because his hand is bandaged up, and she has like a black eye." I think that just adds more complexity to it because it is never black or white. So of course she would, after just coming up off the ground after something like that happens, of course your reaction is going to be shove somebody away, and you don't think that they're going to stick their hand into a pile of shattered glass, of hot casserole and shattered glass. And yeah, so it was another one of those morally those gray areas that happen. So
I think some people would come out of that saying she's equally as abusive, or that particular situation, because, I mean, hell, Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, that's exactly what they said.
Geez.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think that those people are negating the fact that there's a trauma response. If you just woke up from being basically laid out and not understanding what happened, to not wanting this person that you have these foggy memories of hitting you, to be near you at that moment.
And that is with every subsequent instance of domestic violence that they have at home. This is when it starts getting ickier and ickier for me, because his reactions to realizing what he just did becomes more and more gross. He becomes more desperate. He is in her face trying to get her to forget about it and play it off. And, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again," making all these promises. And that is just, after that first instance, that's when it's all downhill for me.
He also,
and that's when he starts being more manipulative.
Manipulation.
With,
that's what I was
going
to say.
Let's get married. Wouldn't it be great to have a baby? And blah, blah, blah. Like, that's when, maybe that's why I thought that first thing of meeting the mom was manipulative, because of his behaviors progressing after.
And see, I didn't take the wedding or the baby as manipulation on his part.
Oh, geez.
I took those again as him trying to prove that he was better than what he was being, right? That he was wanting to take those steps with her.
Do you still feel that way?
Yeah. I mean, I saw
Mm.
manipulation from him after each time. Don't get me wrong. I saw him manipulating her into not telling people what actually happened and
Or beating her to the
into
punch. Yeah.
the book went into this even more with her dad too, into every like couple weeks after an abusive situation, the next 2 weeks were fan freaking tastic, right? Because he would do all the things that she wanted him to do in the first place. He would make that effort, and that is where I saw the manipulation. But I think those things outside of that, trying to make it better, once he realized it was better, I think that those were true Ryle moments up
Mm.
until the next manipulation.
We're going to have to disagree on that part, but I can understand where you're coming from 110%. Why it looks that way to you. I understand.
I think that
I
that was
just like
just,
for me, I always just felt like he was trying to control what her reaction would be after that happened by showing that he wanted all those mature, responsible things still with her. That's why I look at it as manipulation
well, and I
because he's
think,
still trying to control what happens afterward and how she interprets it and moves on from that.
so I think timeline for me would be very important. I'm assuming that there has been at least a month or two in between when the abuse happened and when these things happened, because we've had
It's
a
kind of
baby
hard to
in the in
tell
between time, right? Like,
in the
because when he
movie.
says he wants to get married, isn't it
I feel
something
like
big had
everything
just
happened
happened? Just
very
and then
quickly.
when he said he wanted to have a baby, that was after the sister's baby was born. So that was like 9 months in, at least, because
Mm-hmm.
sister didn't get pregnant for a little while after they got together. So I mean, and even that feels like it came up like a normal regular conversation, because sister brought up something about babies and he's like, I would like to have babies with her if she wants them. And
Were they
so to
married?
me, yes.
No, he is that when he proposed when the baby was born? Like he got down
Well,
on his
in the
knee or
movie it
something?
was, but I don't think that that's when he proposed in the book. I
Yeah, I
think that
can't
they were
remember the
already
timeline.
married in the book, because she even says in the book that she never got to see him because that was right after the baby was born, was the last domestic violence
Mm-hmm.
incident,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so she never got to see him and how he was with Riley, because she wouldn't let there be any moments together. And so I think he brought up the baby with her at that point after the baby was born, but I think that they had gotten married before. And I'm going out on a timeline limb of, so they get together, it's like 2 or 3 months before the sister announces the baby. There was that first kind of iffy, in everybody's
Yeah.
opinion, domestic violence incident. Then there was the second one that was less iffy
The
in
stairs.
that in between time, and then they get married after that one. So that could be, depending on how long it was in between that second time and the marriage, and then that third time after he had mentioned the baby. And I'm pretty sure that was after he'd mentioned the baby, because there's not any talk about a baby, and she didn't know she was pregnant. They weren't trying for a baby.
Yeah.
So I think the third domestic violence was after that baby was born.
Yeah, it was.
And so I don't see him being manipulative in that instance, because he hadn't been abusive recently. So why is he manipulating her if he's not been abusive recently? Because that's not how abusers work. They think after their 2 weeks of penance, they're good and they go back to their normal selves, and then they do it again, and then they have their 2 weeks or whatever of penance, and then they go back. And so you have this cycle of abuse, penance, normal relationship, abuse, penance, normal relationship. And so I think some of those things weren't at least meant to be manipulative. I think they may have been more manipulative towards him in some ways, because he wanted to want those things, right? Like you said, he was kind of talking himself into it because he
Yeah.
wanted her.
Yeah.
So I can see him trying to talk himself into that, thinking that that would make him better or help him be a better person in the relationship. But I don't
Yeah.
know if he was trying to manipulate her in the sense of kind of baby trapping her,
Yeah.
if that makes
That
sense.
timeline doesn't match up for that. What I did find really gross was book and movie. Second time the domestic violence occurs right before the stairwell, and she's talking to her mom, hangs up, he broke something. She goes in to check, and he's like, I dropped your phone. My first thought was, why did you have her fucking phone? Like, what were you doing? And so, like, in my brain, I'm like, is he Has he been checking her phone? Like, why did he have her phone?
Well, in the movie, she asked him to go plug her phone in.
She asked him to plug in her phone. I don't think that happened in the book, though.
No, I don't think so either. But in the
Because
movie,
she took a
she point
shower in
blankly
the book.
asks him.
Yeah, in the book, she took a shower and comes out, and he's fucking pissed off because he dropped her phone and found this. And so, my mind, I'm just like, there's abuse happening all the time, not just these big situations that happen physically. Yeah.
And that's what I was getting at with her dad. Like, there's abuse all the time. It's just, are they the memories that stick?
Yeah.
No.
How's it manifesting?
It's the big abuse that sticks. It's not the little things. It's not the little comments. It's not the manipulations or the, I don't know the word I'm looking for, the swaying of opinions. It's not those things. Those things happen the entire time. Like, even from the beginning, you could say that there was abuse. Like, you could say that there was the inklings of abuse because he wouldn't let it go, right? He kept trying to get her to have sex with him, even though she said,
the fact that he just showed up on her doorstep and was just like, I knocked on X number of doors to get to yours. Yeah, I mean, there were red flags all along.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are little signs of abuse, or probably, full-on abuse, that just, they're not as big as those.
But you have to give it up to the writing in the book and for the movie as well, because even watching it and knowing what happens, I still felt so much for Ryle. Like, a part of me wanted it to work out. Like, oh, I want them to stay together and stay a family, and for him to be present in Lily's life and baby Emerson's life, Emmy's life, I want it to work out. You learn to see all of those appealing things about Ryle that made Lily fall in love with him. And that's what was so difficult to grapple with. And then on the other hand, there was the Atlas relationship. I will say, I liked how that whole dynamic was depicted, because he didn't just come in and swoop in and then immediately start this romantic agenda with her, right? He always came in from, you need a safe place. I am a safe place for you until you can get your own apartment and stand on your own 2 feet. And he never crossed a line. And I loved him for that.
I think his life, how he lived it, was also why he did that. Because I think as a kid, he would have loved for his mom to have a safe space.
I'm going to get all weepy.
So yes, I think while he's still deeply in love with her, he's still deeply in love with her. Like, whatever makes her happy is what he wants.
They had a small change in the movie where he never told Lily that Cassie was made up, whereas
he never told her in the book, though, either. Like, that is one of my favorite scenes. No, he did not. That was one of my favorite scenes. The friends did. They're like, who the fuck's Cassie? And she's like, his girlfriend. They're like, he doesn't have a girlfriend. And so they tell her. He never tells her in the book either.
He pulled her aside because they're saying this in front of him. He's like, shit, now I have to like come clean to her and say, yes, it was made up. So I'll say that I liked how he still didn't say, oh, I just made Cassie up, because he didn't want to influence her decision making whatsoever in whether she stayed or left Ryle.
It wasn't this guy versus this guy. It was,
yes, correct. Yeah.
He's abusing you. You need to like realize that he is abusing you.
Something I didn't really care for that changed, even though I loved just the style and stuff that went with it, was they made her much more financially well off when she met Ryle than she was in the book. Because in the book, she had this roommate named Lucy, and Lucy was dating a guy, and she had a crappy apartment that she shared with Lucy. Even though they had to age up Lily and Ryle for the movie, maybe that plays a part in them being more financially stable. But that's just another factor of Lily being able to leave Ryle.
Yeah.
Is because she has the means, right?
Yeah. And I mean, in the book, at the end, she has the means too.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she has a very popular florist shop and she's making money. One thing that I simply adored, both in the books and in the movie, is the sister. Because after the first incident, sister knew nothing about it. It was made to look, and everybody was talking about it as if it was an accident.
Yeah, they joked it off.
The second incident, it was harder to play that off, right? And the sister found out in the book what actually happened. And I think that that's where the sister pulls her aside and tells her a little bit more about why he goes into those rages, right? And she asks Lily to give him a chance. And Lily does. And then after the third instance, the sister is like, as his sister, I wish you could forgive him. But as your best friend, if you go back to him, I will not talk to you anymore. I will never talk to you again. And I loved that kind of a support, even though she loves her brother.
Mm-hmm.
She can acknowledge that her brother is a shithead at times, right?
Very flawed. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say you never see that, but you don't see that very often where the family of the abuser recognizes the abuse. It's usually a victim blaming situation. Well, what did you do to make him do that? Well, what did you do?
Or what happened
you don't have the
yeah.
right to do this. You don't have the right to take that baby away from him. You don't have the right. It's very much a blame the woman. And if the only avenues of support you have are blaming you, then again, it's easier to not leave.
It's just such a complicated, nuanced thing. Even at the end of the movie and the book, you still get the sense that Lily loves Ryle very, very deeply still, right?
Well, she shows that. And she shows how much she's still under his control a little bit with the naming of the damn baby. She
names that how
it
you
Emerson.
Looked at it?
I think it's cute, but I think that was her last, or still wanting to be a family, right? She wanted to name this baby something that meant something to him.
That's an interesting angle, because I looked at it as this was her final gift to him to help him heal. I think she knew what she was going to decide all along, which was to divorce, and she did it in a public, open setting, when the baby was born. But I think she had her mind set up to leave him, and her naming their daughter Emerson was a gift for him to be able to heal. Like, this was her saying, I don't hate you, I don't resent you, I love you, and I will always love the time that we had together. This is me naming our daughter after your brother that you lost, that, has haunted you ever since.
I can see that. I'm just saying, deep in her, she still wants him to be happy. She still feels for him. She still, even the naming of the child is about him.
Even Alyssa Marshall's child being named after Riley.
Yeah. I think, and that's all I'm saying. Like, she is a people pleaser from childhood, right? And I think that is one of her coping mechanisms. And I think even the naming of the child was a coping mechanism for her. It was about Ryle, not about her. And the same with, like, after the abuse, how you mentioned, like, she pulls his face, she tries to help him, even though she is the one that just suffered this. Her whole relationship has been about Ryle. And even that naming of the baby, like, the last thing they did in their relationship, she gave him.
Isn't it crazy how in the opening scene of the movie, they're playing this game of naked truths, but the core truth that each of one of them shares is something they don't really think about later. And his is, what happens to that child for killing his brother is the rest of his life is fucked up. And then she tells him that she's basically an unreliable narrator. Those truths that were spoken in the beginning of the movie, like, carried throughout the end of the movie. I still felt shocked when all of this stuff played out, regardless of being told that this is who they are. Right. It's so crazy. It's almost satisfying.
And that's how a relationship is. They tell you who they are, and you just don't want to believe them.
No, you got the love blinders on, seeing through the rose-colored lenses.
So one thing that I was kind of disappointed when I went to see the movie is I wore a floral dress and nobody else did. Did people in your theater wear, like, florals?
I got into the theater when preview started playing, so I couldn't see anyone. I wore jeans and a cardigan.
So you weren't as invested in this situation as I was.
I thought your dress was very on theme. It was very on point for the movie, and I thought it was a pretty dress.
Well, like, I've read all of these articles where Blake Lively is like, go get your friends and wear floral and go see the movie. And I was like, okay, everybody's going to be wearing florals.
This is what happens when you go down all the rabbit holes of looking up all these articles, whatever.
I just look like the person too invested in the damn movie.
Were there a lot of other husbands or boyfriends or anything in the movie?
Four
I
total
saw
men.
same. I saw a handful of guys in the movie. I can't tell you if they're straight, married, gay, whatever, but there were a handful of guys.
Oh, I
But
could tell you because they came in with their women, and two of them looked very up to be there, and then
oh
two of them
no,
were
that's
going
not what
along
you
with
want.
it.
These guys need to be good sport. Lose attitude.
Justin even made a
Oh,
comment about like one, and he's like, okay, so you can tell that this is going to be a chick flick because that guy just offered to go get popcorn. And there's no way that if this was a movie he was wanting to see, he would go get the popcorn. She would have been going to get the
oh.
popcorn. I'm like,
I mean, good point. Did
He's like, he
Justin get
doesn't care if he
sad?
misses anything. He's like, peace. It's going to take me 20 minutes.
The women's line after the movie. I mean, Taylor and I were first through the women's restroom doors because I needed to go to the bathroom, A, but B, I wanted to check my makeup because I sobbed way more than I thought I was going to sob during that movie. Not a single dry eye. And you can tell people were trying to hold their tears in throughout the movie, but it was just
Mm-hmm.
this chorus of sniffles and those huffy gasps and everything throughout the movie.
So I realized the movie was PG-13. They took out a lot of the spicy scenes. And I think in the book that adds a different level of their relationship is those
Yeah.
spicy scenes.
Yeah.
Because
It
there's a
deepens
whole
the connection in a way.
stethoscope scene that I'm like, holy shit.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But then that leads into the second. I forgot what he was mad about in the second.
I think the second instance was finding the phone number, right? After they were married. And she was just like, it's
Yes.
nothing. Like, I haven't even looked at it. Like, I promise you. And he's like, you really promise that nothing, da 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 da. He was, I just hated those moments so much because he started just seeming more and more insecure, less
Mm-hmm.
sure of himself and confident, and just became so needy and codependent in a way, very possessive and just so insecure. But we haven't even talked about Atlas all that much, and I liked Atlas's character, and
Well,
I
that's because
thought that,
Alice doesn't get a whole lot of time in this one.
which makes sense because he's not a part
He's
of the story, right?
yeah.
He's a reason.
He's a part of the past and
for
probably the future. Like
Mhm.
he's bookends.
Okay, one thing that confused me in the movie, maybe you can explain this to me. There's a part where she gives Ryle a notebook. He's like, "This isn't mine." She's like, "No, I'm giving that to you." What was that? Was that her Ellen diary or what?
No, I think
What
that
was
that
it?
was her way of getting him to look back at her because she then says that I kind of love you too. And then he hands the book back and she throws it on the counter after they
That
kiss.
went over my head because that is not how I interpreted that at all. I was like,
Yeah,
"Is
at
this just
first
an
I
Easter
interpreted it
egg,
the
like a
same way you
nod?"
did. And I'm like, why the hell is she
I'm so
giving him this
confused.
thing after they just get into this fight over fucking Atlas that is going to like piss him the fuck off?
Yeah.
Like, as an abuse survivor, you do not give him ammo, right? Like, you don't give him
Oh,
ammo. But no, like, I think that was just her way of distracting him. And then she comes in with the, like, I kind of love you too. And
okay.
then they
That
start
makes
kissing, and then
sense
the
because
notebook ends up on the counter. So that's
okay.
why I don't think it was important.
I
But
was
it
so
could be like
confused.
the
I couldn't
coffee
even tell
cup
you.
in Game of Thrones, and they didn't really realize what was
God,
happening
the
there.
damn coffee cup.
There's also like they gloss over, and this is a scene that I could see manipulation on Ryle's part. They gloss over the fact that for his job he wants her to move with him, and she's like,
Right.
no, like, this is my home, this is where my mom is, this is where my shop is, this is where my friends are, I'm not leaving. And he
I
gets a
mean,
little bit
he gets pissy, right? But he eventually
mm-hmm.
is okay with it and apologizes. But that was
Yeah,
just another thing that happened, right? Where he's trying to
yeah,
control where she is and who's around her, her dependence on him. That would have been a bad decision on her part.
yeah.
And also the time away that he spent in England in the book, so they had some physical distance, and that gave her time to separate from him and really figure out how she feels about this and what she wants to do.
Mm-hmm. I also I get it, but I also don't get it. His jealousy of Atlas. Because you see it from those very first scenes where he knows nothing about Atlas in present. He's just heard her mention that she lost her
She lost her
virginity
V
to him.
card.
And then they've had zero contact. But this dude is so possessive that he is so jealous of Atlas, even though she's had 9 years, 8 years of no contact with him. And he loses his shit. And that's the, like, I do, but I don't understand that for him.
I mean, later is almost a self-fulfilling prophecy for him whenever he point blank asks her, do you love me? She's like, of course I love you. He's like, do you love... No, he says, do you love him still? She's like, I love you. He's like, that's not the question that I asked. Do you love him? She's like, I don't know.
But in the book, she says that he will always have a place in my heart. I will always
Which
love
rightfully
him
so, right?
To a certain degree, because yes, her dad almost fucking killed the dude in front of her, even if it's just a trauma love response.
And he said that she saved his life
for that. Like, I'm sorry, that is misplaced jealousy. And that, like you said, was a self-fulfilling prophecy for him, because he kept getting worse over this jealousy that should not have even existed. Like, she wasn't going out with Atlas. She wasn't going behind his back. She wasn't having conversations. She wasn't doing anything to build a relationship with Atlas in the present. Yes, they had a relationship in the past, but dude, you're a womanizer. You've had lots of situations in the past. Like, get the fuck over it. But that's, again, I think one of the things with men and women is women aren't supposed to have had any kind of a past. And any kind of a past is bad for women, whereas men are just good.
Just goes with the territory. You know, that's how it goes. Okay, so given everything with this first movie, this first book, you haven't read the second book, which is It Starts With Us.
I don't think I've read the second book. And I think I need to clarify, because I've told Sandra this. Okay, so I bought the second book like years ago.
Only bought the second book.
Only bought the second book because I thought it was the first book, because It Starts With Us should be the beginning, right? Like, in my head, I thought that was the first book. And so I bought it, and it was like right after it came out. So I either have book amnesia about it, because I don't remember the characters of Lily and Ryle or Atlas, or I figured out before I read it that it's actually the second book, and so it's still sitting on my shelf. I don't know for sure. It may come back to me when I'm reading it that I have, in fact, read that book.
Do you think
I
we're
may
gonna
have
get
some
a
deja
second...
vu moments.
You'll have to let me know if you actually did read the second book first. Do you think that we're going to get a second movie?
I hope so. I think so. I don't think Justin Baldoni will direct it. I don't think he had a good time in this movie. Just based off of some things I saw online, like, even he has said, I don't think I'll be back.
I hope they don't change out him as a character, though. That always just throws me out of it. Like, the after
he be
series
in the second book very much?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's still
Emmy's
the
dad,
whole
maybe?
parenting dynamic. You get the sense that she is maybe she's open to pursuing things with Atlas, right? But there's still definitely the dynamic with, okay, what kind of headspace is Ryle in? Is he healing? Is he growing? How's he going to handle this? So that's still very much a big question mark that's going to have to be developed in the second book.
I could see him getting some, like, therapy and stuff and becoming better.
Yeah, he's not a bad guy. He has a lot going for him. He just, he needs some help, some professional help.
Yeah, anger management.
Yeah.
Some therapy for his coping
He's got blackout
mechanisms.
rage. I don't know what you do about blackout rage.
Well, I think he needs to address his trauma regarding his brother, and then that will help that rage. I'm talking like he's an actual person and we're actually going to help him.
but these people are out there. Yeah.
And I say again, I feel like I'm like a walking trauma, because I'm like, every time we read these traumatic books, I'm like, I've been there. I've done that. I've had a lot of trauma responses that once I got into therapy, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. And you start addressing the trauma behind it that sometimes you don't even realize you had, and you can start changing those trauma responses a little bit. And so I hope for Ryle, who is a real character in my brain, he gets some help with that, because I think his life would be a lot better.
Yeah, so he can be the best dad version he can be for Emmy, too.
And how sweet was that? Like, I know it's supposed to be such a tear-jerking moment where she tells him she wants a divorce, but I just had a lot of love for both of them in that moment, and how they handled that moment.
Yeah, because you're a human being. You would hope that somebody would walk away from that scene like feeling just heartstrings tugged for both ends of it, right?
Like, I loved it. I loved how she got him to understand why, that it was, you know, if your daughter did this. Because I don't think her dad would have cared.
One of the criticisms of the book and movie is that Colleen Hoover or the movie romanticizes these villains, these bad people, these people that abuse and are violent.
Is it this movie that says, or this book that says, there aren't bad people, there are people who do bad things?
I don't know if it's this book. Would it be in the
Okay,
acknowledgments?
no, I thought it was Ryle saying this during their first meetup, but I could be
Maybe.
wrong. I think that along with we blame the women for staying, but we don't blame, or we don't hold the men to the same standard for doing the abuse, are the takeaways for this book for me. He's not all bad because he did something bad, but he needs to be held to the same standard we're trying to hold Lily to, in that why didn't she just fucking leave? Well, why didn't he just fucking stop? Like,
When she was in his face, begging and begging and begging.
Yeah.
Like, that was hard to watch.
I don't think it's glamorizing or romanticizing it. I think it's putting a correct lens on it. Because when you're in that situation, you don't always want to believe that you're in that situation.
No, you don't want to believe that, and you want to believe in the potential of it. Like, you see the potential and what it can be instead of living in the reality.
Yeah, and you want to believe in the person that you love, and that he didn't mean to do this to you, or that there's no way he could have done this on purpose because he loves you. And I think that is something that as women, we are ingrained from like birth to want to have, is love of a man. Like, I mean, how many Taylor Swift songs are about like people saying you run through men too much, they don't actually love you, blah blah blah. I think there's a line in one of her songs that's all they want to see is either a wife or a one-night stand. They don't want me to be an in-between. I think we're ingrained to want the love behind it and not want to give up on that over every little thing, because also we're ingrained to believe that we're hysterical and emotional and all of these things, which are counterintuitive to a relationship sometimes.
Well, look at how many emotional outbursts Ryle had. He was the more emotional one.
But men aren't emotional.
Rage doesn't
Sandra.
count, apparently.
Yeah. Violence doesn't count. So
okay.
I think it's very much like my take on After, that I don't think that was romanticizing a toxic relationship. I think it was bringing to light that this happens. Whereas everybody wants to either believe, okay, it happened, but let's just get over it, or that doesn't actually happen, you're just making that up. I don't think that this is the type of relationship people should be trying to get, and I don't think that that's what they implied with this movie at all. Maybe a little bit more with After, that they were implying that this is a good back and forth,
If y'all don't know what we're referring to, the After series by Anna Todd. I think it's 5 books in that series, and then a spinoff.
4 movies.
That was our very first episode on Story Darling, so go back and give that a listen if you're curious about those books.
But no, I don't think that I think for me it made me feel seen a little bit.
Yeah, it did too.
I nowhere in that did I come out of it thinking, oh, I want a man like Ryle. I mean, yes, Ryle has some good points, and
nice
I would like a man
job.
with those good points. But I mean, he was 6'3", blue eyes. No, he didn't have blue eyes. Never mind. I was trying to do that like TikTok
tall,
thing. 6'5", blue eyes, in finance.
It was good. Yeah. I really enjoyed the movie. I hope we get a sequel, and I could see me like owning this movie so that on a cloudy, rainy day when I just feel like wallowing and want to watch a quote unquote chick flick, that I'll just pop it on, because there were fun moments, like nice moments too, but there is, a lot of serious stuff happening.
Like, I know you gave me a hard time about my book picks and it being a cozy movie, but that's what I mean, this is not objectively a cozy movie.
I read 3 different books during your birthday month, and one of them was the 600-page downer. Okay. One of them was a light, fluffy read, and then the other one was a downer-ish too. I didn't think they were going to be downers.
Yeah. She doesn't know.
I went in like, oh, let's see what's going to happen.
I find that hilarious though, because Sandra, like, if you've listened to our first bits of our podcast, Sandra's always the downer. And I'm always the like, look on the bright side, it could be worse.
Yeah.
And then my books are like, life fucking sucks. And Sandra's books are light little reads.
I mean, in my defense, I feel like I was going through it in the first season of the show. Understandable. But I'm in a better place now.
You're not the downer anymore in our group. I'm now the downer. I'm now the doll.
You're not a downer. You're not a downer. You bring a different perspective, and I bring a different perspective.
Yeah. But yes, this is not a movie that I would. I mean, I love this movie. I would probably rewatch it multiple times.
I liked them,
but I would have to
in
be
love.
in a certain mood for this kind of a movie.
The whole first part of the movie, though, is the cat and mouse game of her, stringing him along, and what is he willing to do to finally get her to like give him a chance. You know what I mean? And so that was fun to watch. This new love blossom between them.
I love the onesies too.
Oh, yeah.
I thought those were hilarious.
We'll see, what the next book does. But you can tell this was low budget. I mean, they had styling for Blake, but the fact that he didn't go to England, they had to cut out so many friendships. So she had a gay friend named Devin. Who she worked with before. He wasn't in this book because he was a ploy to make Ryle jealous at the party. So yeah, it just focused on very intimate scenes between the two of them. So low budget in that sense.
I don't think they had a stylist for Blake. Those were Blake's clothes. And Gigi Hadid's and I think Taylor Swift's clothes also got thrown in there a little bit. So yeah, that was actually their...
When I was watching the movie, it was the party scene, right? Where Lily walks out and it focuses on her sparkly boots and it goes up her body.
Those are Blake's boots. That's what brought the conversation up. Is those
and her
fucking
big
boots.
Hair. Yes. My sister turns to look at me. We like swivel our heads, look at each other, and she goes, "She is so disgustingly beautiful." I was like, I know. It's insane. And that's kind of the feedback I'm hearing from other guys too who went and watched this movie just because they are Blake Lively stans, is she was freaking amazing.
So I turned to Justin and I was like, those boots.
They're beautiful.
Are gorgeous.
Love them. All her outfits. She got a lot of shit for the styling of her going into the movie. Like all these out of context shots of her kind of that chic hobo look on the street. But it worked with her character. It was just different, very whimsical.
However, I did catch the low budget in one of the end scenes with trees. Like if you looked closely, the trees did something weird. It was like they tried to edit them together or something, and one came out further than the other in pixelated
Is this the funeral
form.
Scene or the grave one or a different scene?
Yes, the grave. She went back to Maine. One of them comes out pixelated.
Oh no.
Or at least it did in my movie theater.
Well, when I get the movie, when it's available, I'll have to go and see.
You'll never unsee that now.
Yeah, those are the things
unless
you can never
they fix
unsee.
it before it comes out. They might fix it.
I didn't notice anything like that, but whatever.
Okay, if you go see the movie after this, let me know if I went crazy or if it did in fact do that. It's in the scene as she's driving with the baby back up to Maine.
So it's when she's in the car? So not at the gravestone.
I don't remember if it's in the car or right after, but there's a whole bunch of trees on the right upper hand side of the screen.
Okay, I wasn't looking at the trees, so Tera was.
Well, I was like, wait, did you see that? Justin also saw it with the trees.
That's okay. It was definitely
there's something wrong with that tree.
It was y'all's movie theater.
Yeah, maybe.
Somebody will let us know. But anyways, we hope you enjoyed our discussion on It Ends With Us, both by Colleen Hoover and the Blake Lively adaptation. I don't know how you're feeling about it, Tera.
I love both of them.
I did too. I thought they both accomplished the same goal.
And you're never going to have a movie be as good as the book. You're just never going to.
You just get so much more context and character rounding.
So I didn't go into it expecting the movie to be just as good as the book.
I think it's definitely enticing for people who haven't read the book and watched the movie to want to read the book now, because Taylor walked out of that movie and she was like, I was so confused by the timeline of events. I couldn't tell how soon or later after that things were happening. Does the book give more context into that? I'm like, yes, 100%. The book gives so much more about different things. So
yeah,
highly recommend reading that.
I can see that because you have one episode where she just now found out she was pregnant, and then literally a minute later she's at least 8 months pregnant, and you're like, where did that time come from? And
he's asking for permission to
touch her belly.
Yeah, it was a blur. So
her life probably was a blur at that time too. So
yeah, our next episode will cover the book Flock, by Kate Stewart. That one's not based on a movie, but this is one that Tara and I have read previously, like 3 years ago, and we really enjoyed it. So this one is hopefully a lighter read in many ways, but still really intriguing with
This is one
some
that
of the mystery.
Sandra suggested about 3 years ago when she was in her down phase, though. So take that as you will.
We'll see what that means next week. Join us on August 20th for our episode of The Flock. All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.